I wanted to wait for this whole lovely little sunburn issue that I had to completely go away before making another design video. But a topic came up that we're going to have to put aside vanity for today, as I want to talk a little bit about the Cuphead Enchanted Portals issue and why this isn't as easy of a clear-cut case of copyright infringement or a developer acting maliciously. There won't be any footage in the upper left hand corner for this little piece, because we're going to full screen in a minute or so. But before we get there, just a quick primer as to what's going on and some of the basics for this kind of case. So if you missed the news, a Kickstarter trailer was revealed for the game Enchanted Portals, which developers are billing it as spiritually inspired by Cuphead. And from looking at the trailer and what you're going to see in the next minute when we go to it, it looks a lot more than just spiritually inspired by Cuphead, with many people downvoting and claiming that developers are stealing or copycatting or cloning Cuphead, which there was a Cuphead clone on mobile. I think they came out like a week or so after the PC and Xbox launch. But these cases are always very serious to discuss, as nobody likes to deal with clones or the idea of somebody stealing from another title. With that said, though, it's important for everyone to understand a few basic points whenever we have cases like this. The first one is very simple. Nobody can copyright a mechanic / gameplay loop or a system of a game. And again, when we use the term mechanic, we're referring to the verbs of a title. Running, jumping, shooting, resource management, tactical strategy, you name it. Those elements cannot be copyrighted, which is why we saw so many platformers, first-person shooters, and so on. With that said, the elements that can be copyrighted by a company are any kind of brandable elements, aesthetics, cues that are kind of artistic to that game, anything essentially that directly references the brand or the major characters of a title. So if I want to make a platformer where a character picks up a power-up and then they throw fireballs, I can do that. If I take the exact Fire Flower model from Super Mario Bros. Put into my game, that's not allowed. And again, for obvious point, any code or assets cannot be, used by another developer. But again, taking elements that are aesthetic cues or brandable elements from one game and using that in your own is another story. To give you an example, in the real-time strategy genre, the three popular strategies are Boom, Turtle, and Rush. And the concept of a rush was coined by using the Zergling rush in StarCraft. Now, any developer making an RTS can use the rush strategy. That is not copyrighted. But if I call mine the Zergling rush, Zergling is a property held by Blizzard. It is their property, and I can't use that. Another example is the UI elements about having your health and your mana on both sides of the screen in an ARPG. There's so many ARPGs that did just this, and it was popularized by Diablo. But Blizzard doesn't own the trademark or the copyright for this kind of UI convention. They do own the aesthetic of having like a little angel kind of like being on part of the fountain and a little devil on the other one. So if your game uses that exact same styling, then you are pulling from Diablo's aesthetic, and that's not allowed. And another thing that's very important, whenever we have cases of cloning and copycats and stuff like that, when we're talking about some of the harder cases, it's never one thing. There's no such thing as a smoking gun evidence unless a developer outright steals or takes something from another game. Instead, it's about proving that there's enough similarities between one game that it could be confused with another title, or that it looks like it's borrowing direct elements from it. And like we said, mechanics are not copyrightable. You can have 10 different run and gun action games set in the 1930s style. But if you start pulling cues and aesthetic conventions and elements from one game to use in your own, that is a different story. So what we're going to do now is, after this quick shout out to our current Patreon supporters and sponsors, we're going to do a little side-by-side comparison of Enchanted Portals and Cuphead, and kind of talk about where things get a little bit murky in this case. And now for a quick thank you to our current Game Wisdom sponsors and Patreon supporters. And if you'd like to continue the discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, link down below. Alright, we're getting very fancy, I guess, for our video today. I think this is our first picture-in-picture kind of comparison. But what you should be seeing on screen right now are going to be the Cuphead launch trailer on the left and the Enchanted Portals Kickstarter trailer on the right. I'm going to be playing them both, as well as showing specific parts off. But I want you all to just pay attention to the aesthetic cues and kind of the stylings of both games. But here we go. We'll start with Cuphead. Alright, so that was Cuphead's trailer, and there are a few things I'm going to go back to after we watch the Enchanted Portals piece, but that should give you a good idea of what to expect there. So let's take a look at this one now. Alright, so those are both trailers, and you can definitely see, again, there are some major similarities in design and the aesthetics between the two. I want to kind of go back a little bit here. Sorry about that repeat. But if we look at these, a quick side-by-side comparison of both characters being on screen at the same time, you can see how the scenes look very similar. We have both characters kind of taking up, like, what would you say, like a 16th of the screen size. We have a larger character on there. You're still seeing that kind of handmade or that hand-drawn aesthetic to it. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that Enchanted Portals does not look as fast compared to Cuphead. The bullet projectiles are a lot slower. However, with that said, both games tend to feature similar bullet types. I'm trying to see if the Cuphead trailer... Yeah, exactly. If you look right here, both games feature a very similar setup for a boss fight. The one on the left, of course, I forget the name, but it was the flower fight. And in that one, you couldn't touch the ground when they were doing projectiles, and you had those 3 platforms. And that looks like supposed to be, I guess, the Princess and the Frog on the right-hand side there. Now, with that said, one thing that I wanted to point out, which I don't know if I get an exact image, maybe I can. If you look right here, let me see if I can fast forward. Actually, let me go back like 1 second. Right here. In Cuphead, there is an aesthetic that whenever you use one of your specials or your superpowers, the screen flashes black for a second, and then the attack goes off. Now, if you look right here, the game does the exact same thing. And that, again, it's not completely damning, but this is one of those things you have to watch out for when you're comparing or you're trying to build your game off of another title. Because this is not a mechanic. This is an aesthetic choice that Studio MDHR did when designing Cuphead. Another example is that whenever you do a parry in Cuphead, the game kind of stops for a split second while you hear that slap sound. Those aren't tied to the run and gun and shooting mechanics. But when you do something like this, it feels like it's very similar. And again, when you look at these 2 screenshots right here, you can see these similarities. It almost looks like the exact same amount of the color wash out or being darkened during the special move. And like we said, what makes this very hard and why it's not as open and shut of a case is that Enchanted Portals does feature original design assets. While the basic, from what we're seeing in this trailer, the basic gameplay loop that you're controlling the characters with is pretty much mirroring Cuphead, these are original boss fights. I'm going to just let the footage play, we won't have the music here. But there was not a boss fight like that in Cuphead, or like this one. The Kali Maria fight is very similar, that we're fighting a larger aquatic enemy, or aquatic, but not that same one. And this fight with, I guess that's supposed to be a Ludwig Beethoven, there was no battle in Cuphead like that. And that's what makes this very tricky to talk about. I'm going to let the Cuphead footage play a little bit more while I'm talking here. That if the developers were being 100% malicious with trying to steal from Cuphead, they could have copied the boss fights wholesale. Make every fight similar, instead of it being a flower, maybe, I don't know, it's a rose, or etc. But with Enchanted Portals, it looks like it is heavily inspired. Again, so much so that it's what's calling this issue into play. But they're still trying to do enough things unique or interesting. And the other point, I think what a lot of people are also kind of citing, is that Enchanted Portals does not look as good as Cuphead. Again, this is a Kickstarter trailer compared to the fully released, or at the time of that trailer on the left there, almost released game. And that, I think, has a lot of people not too happy about it. That your game's coming out later and it's looking worse than the game you're trying to emulate. But to kind of begin to wrap things, or at least put things into perspective, I don't honestly think that this is a case of developers acting maliciously. I think that this is developers being huge fans of Cuphead and wanting to make their own take on it, and maybe confusing that line between design and aesthetics. Again, the run and gun gameplay that's in Cuphead, that cannot be copyrighted. Not even the 1930s aesthetic. But when you have characters of similar shape, using similar looking projectiles, with a similar style of music, as well as aesthetic cues for everything, that is when things start to get a little murky. And I would honestly suggest developers to maybe do a touch up on all the aesthetics and all the general animations of the game to try and make things more, make them kind of stand out more. Instead of having a triple shot that looks like Cuphead, maybe make it be a triple shot of birds flying out, or pigeons, or flowers, or again, anything that you can do to make your game look different. And ultimately, that is where these cases come into play. That if you were to show somebody Cuphead, Enchanted Portals, or anything else, such as the issue with Star Control Origins versus Star Control 2, if people are watching that footage and they are having a tough time deciding whether or not these two games are the same or similar, then you have a major problem. And a lot of this just comes down to, again, minor tweaks and removing any doubt in somebody's mind that Game A is the same or copying Game B. And I'm trying to get the footage back of right here. That again, when I put these two side by side, it looks very similar, doesn't it? In terms of the setup of the stage. You could even do something as simple as flip the screen. Instead of the princess and the frog on the right, make her appear on the left-hand side. And again, this is what makes it so weird, is that obviously they are drawing super heavy inspiration from Cuphead, but they're still doing their own unique elements or their own unique design in certain spots. So it's not 100% a ripoff. But again, you need to be careful. And as we've talked about before, it is perfectly okay to be inspired by somebody else's game. But your game's end goal should not be to be somebody else's game. It has to grow from that. At this point, the only other way I could really make a case, either for or against Enchanted Portals, would be to watch like a 5 to 10 minute piece about, watch like a intro to the game. Does it have similar map cues, UI, same kind of level designs with run and gun? And again, when you were listening to the trailers earlier, both use similar big band style tracks. And again, it's never one thing. Like I always say, I always want to be on the side of the developer. But this is very tough. And for those of you watching this right now, I really do want to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think that Enchanted Portals is legitimately a ripoff of Cuphead? Or do you think like there is some wiggle room here? Because again, it feels or looks different, but it doesn't seem like it's enough in that area. But I'm sure this story will develop more as we continue. Ideally, when we get some more news about it, my face should be healed. But thanks for watching this video. Come on back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Until next time, take care. If you're looking for more wisdom about game design, be sure to check out my latest offering of books, 20 Essential Games to Study, aimed for first-time developers and students looking for some inspiration for their upcoming games, and Game Design Deep Dive Platformers if you're interested in anything regarding 2D and 3D platforming design. They're both available in print, digital, and wherever books are being sold. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel linked down below where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.